As you probably know by now, electronic music production is very complicated, so you might be wondering, is there a system that you could follow to actually get really good results every time? Well, I've actually developed a system that has helped my students hit over 100 million streams in multiple genres and get their music signed to some of the world's biggest labels, and the best thing is you can just copy it. And this system kind of takes away a lot of the complication. So here's what I want to share with you today. We're going to go through my perfect D.A.W template setup. We're going to go through sample organization and favorites. We're going to go through how to reference and the importance of focus, and we're going to go through mix levels. We're going to go through arrangement to get out of that 8-bar loop, and then we're going to go into some other stuff as well, like automation. And I want to share all of this with you today because it's actually what we teach in our music production accelerator program. So if you watch this video and you find it useful and you do want to find out about our coaching program, you can click the link below and check it out. I've also shared with you this entire system, which you can download in a free cheat sheet below this video as well to help. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the template walkthrough. So it doesn't matter if you're using Ableton or Logic or FL Studio, it's important to have a template set up to help you work quickly. Because when I started doing this as a full-time job, you're having to produce every day and you want to get things done quickly, so you're in a state of flow because that's the easiest way to work. So let me just walk you through what I use for my Ableton setup. I used to have a really complicated template, but I found it would always kind of push me in a certain direction, and that's why I've simplified this. So I've got this channel, which is an audio track, and that's for my reference track. We're going to get to that in section 3 of this guide today. And then I've got this SC trigger, which is a sidechain trigger. Again, we're going to get to that soon. And then I've got a track set up for my kick drum, a track set up for my other drums, and just a blank MIDI track set up for my bass. I've also got a few plugins here, which I'm going to walk through as well. So reference track, I've got this mono switch, which allows me to reduce the volume of my reference track, which has already been mastered. And it allows me to switch the whole mix into mono, which I'm going to touch upon soon as well. And then I've got this referencing roll off, which is just an EQ. It allows me to listen to just the low frequencies or the high frequencies of my reference track. And then I've got a loudness meter, which allows me to measure the volume or the average volume of that reference track. And then I've got an EQ, which allows me to just view the frequency spread of the reference track. So I'm kind of using it like a spectrum analyzer. And then for the kick drum, I use MIDI. Doesn't matter if you use audio. In fact, audio is probably better in many ways. And then I've got a drum rack in Ableton, but again, you can use audio. It doesn't matter, whatever works for you. And then for my auxiliary channels, I've got a room reverb set up with a very short decay of under half a second. And then I've got a hall reverb with a longer decay of about 5.5 seconds, but I usually change that. And I've got this bass reverb channel, which I don't often use actually, so I'll get rid of that for now. And then on our main master channel, I've got another mono switch, which allows us to switch the whole mix into mono. And then I've got this limiter test, which I don't really use. And then the referencing roll off, so I can compare my tracks to the reference track that I'm going to use as well. And then I've got a loudness meter and a spectrum analyzer on the end, exactly the same as I have on my reference channel. Finally, I've got my reference track set up to go to external out, so it doesn't go through into my main master channel. And that's pretty much it. I really try and keep this as simple as possible because it allows more creativity and flexibility. But you'll develop your own D.A.W template over time. But if you haven't got one, I've included it in the link that's got the cheat sheet to help with this process, so you'll get that there as well. Now let's look at the sample organization and favorites, because this is so important. I've literally worked with thousands of people now, and one of the things they struggle with most is picking the right sounds. If you pick the right sounds and you can compose it well, the mixing and the mastering is kind of easy after that point. So it's really important to organize your samples, spend half a day going through them, selecting your favorites, invest in a couple of really good sample packs for your chosen genre. If you pick a couple of good sample packs and you get to know them, you can use those for years. I'm still using samples that I've had for probably 15 years now. So it's really important. And you can use stuff like Splice as well, of course, but Splice tends not to organize it that well. If you can organize them into your favorites, just duplicate the ones you like most. Don't worry if you've got a couple of duplicates on your hard drive. A kick drum duplicated twice is not going to take up much memory, you know. So I've got my favorites. I've got all of the different categories for drums. I've got all of the different categories for different sounds. And that's where I save my favorites. And that's so every track I start, I know I can reach for some good sounds really quickly. And my friend Josh, who's got over 100 million streams, will sometimes even start using the same project file as a previous track that he's done, delete most of it apart from, for example, the kick and the bass, and then he's got a solid foundation that he knows works to start his next track. So now I'm going to put my headphones on and we'll get into the production part of this guide. And there's one thing that I'm going to show you now that if you get right is going to absolutely change your life. And this is all about focus and having reference tracks. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I see new producers making, in fact, not even new producers, is that they want to be original before they can actually make something that sounds good. But for me, this would be like walking into a karate dojo as a white belt and saying to the sensei, you know what? I'm going to design my own martial art from scratch and it's going to be the best thing ever. No, you learn the basics, you learn what works, because then once you've learned those rules, you can know how to bend them. I resisted this for years. I literally resisted this for years. But when I actually embraced referencing, within a week, within a few days, my entire career trajectory changed. I got my first manager, I got paid for my first remix, and then I started becoming an actual full-time music producer. So please, if you take anything from this guide, let the fact that referencing will help you be that thing. So I've got this reference track set up, and the way to get a good reference track, firstly, is what music do you like listening to? What music do you like producing? Now, for some people, this is really obvious to them. Other people, like myself, have a very broad taste. So I would look at your playlist history and try and find out what you listen to most. That's a good indication of what you probably like to produce. And then where do you get your reference tracks? Just get them from Beatport. They're really high quality. It costs a couple of pounds. You'll support the artist. Just buy the WAV file if you can, because it's higher quality, although really a 320 kilobits per second MP3 is fine. Buy it, download it, and now we're going to bring it into my project file and I'm going to show you exactly how to use it. Now, before you start complaining and say, oh, Will, I want to create something completely original and for the world to see my beautiful creativity, I'm going to show you how you're going to create something original from this. So don't worry, but it all starts with referencing. So I've brought this into that reference track audio channel like that. And you can see, because this track has been mastered, it's really loud. It's like a sausage face. We need to reduce the volume of that so we can create something that's going to be comparably loud. But because we don't have any mastering on our channel yet, on our master channel, like limiting, we need to reduce the volume of this reference track so we're not going to run into clipping issues ourselves. That is exactly what this first thing's for, where I take it down by 12 decibels. It's not going to get rid of all of the effects of mastering, but it is going to reduce the volume enough so the levels I'm about to show you are going to work straight out the gate for our music too. So first thing I'm going to do once I brought it in is get it synced to the tempo of our channel, or of our track, sorry. So I'm going to go into the channel, go to the first transient like so, and you can actually look up what tempo this is. Beatport will tell me anyway, because I've downloaded it from there. I know it's 129 BPM, but actually I can sync it up without even listening to it. So look at this grid here at the moment. You can see it's kind of, the beats are falling off the grid. As I start pushing this up, you'll see it all actually kind of locks into place, just falls into place. So I know it's 129 BPM because I can see when I've set my project to that, it's all synced. And if I zoom further along the track, it's still in sync near the end. So I know it's 129. So it sounds like this. And with the metronome, cool, so we've got that set up. It's simple as that. Next thing I want to do is use this to build myself out a palette of sounds, which I can then use, knowing they work really well together, to create something that's going to be current and that's most likely to fit into the style of the record label that I might be, for example, wanting to sign on. So I will now try and replicate each of these sounds, the most important of which is going to be the kick drum. That's the first sound I'm going to try and match. Absolute filth. So I'm going to find a part of the track where the kick drum's on its own. Okay, this is just a top kick. So there's not really a part of the track that's just got the kick on its own, and that's very common. But even using the top kick can help me, because that's the sound of the top. So I'm listening very carefully for every nuance, and this is really going to train your ears, and that's why referencing is so important. So that's the kick drum. I'm going to try and find a kick drum that's got that similar sound. Now, at this point, you'll probably want to layer your kick drum. You'd want a kick drum that's doing that top kind of atmosphere, and then whatever the low down part of the kick drum, the main body, you'll want as well. So for anyone in doubt, Will Kick 3, it's kind of a joke within the accelerator. That's pretty good for most music. So I might use that for this track. and then find a different top for it, like so. So I'm just going to bring that in, and the way I've got my Ableton Simpler set up is I know that this kick drum, and this is very important, we're getting into level 4 almost, is going to peak at minus 12 decibels. But it's very important that you set your reference track to be minus 12 decibels too. So if we program in that kick drum, like so. Now I was showing this on a call of one of our accelerator students last night, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today. Now I know that our low end is going to be set pretty much the same as the reference track. So I'm going to just copy that part of the reference track, bring it over, and let's look at what level it's hitting in the low end. I'm going to take out all of the frequencies above 100 Hertz. I know this is going to be a bit complex for some of you, but this guide is really meant for people who are very serious about getting to a professional level. It's not really for beginners. So we can see boom, boom, boom. Yes, there's the bass line in there as well. But if we look at our low end as well, and we just take everything off over 100, like so. Now let's look at our low end and compare it to the reference track. So if we've got them opened up to the same size, they should now, if our kick is peaking at minus 12, we can see, look, they're kind of hitting in the same place, right? Which is exactly what we want. So that's the perfect foundation to start our track. Now I'll take off that referencing filter of both the reference track and our master channel. And then I'm basically going to spend the next hour trying to find sounds that match those of the reference track. Now, of course, that takes practice. And if you jump into the accelerator program, every week we have 2 live calls for 3 hours where we actually pick apart sounds and give homework feedback for an entire 12 months. So that's why it works so well. That's how our students get really good results, because you kind of need that feedback. But that's what I'll do for the next hour. I'll go the kick drum, then I'll go bass, then I'll go the main clap or snare, then I'll do all the other drums, and I'll replicate the notes as well. So that's why this technique works so well, because once I've got the track set up at the right tempo, I can hit Warp, Complex Pro, and I can slow down this project like this. I wouldn't really slow it down more than about 30 to 40% because then it starts going weird. But now I can use that to really hone in what's happening. So here, there's no hi-hat in that first beat. But then the hi-hat starts, and there's an open hat there. So that's why this technique works so well. In the accelerator, we actually call it the X-ray technique, because it allows you to really hone in to the structure of what's going on in your reference track. And actually, we go into a lot more detail, of course, because as I said, it would take me an hour to do that. So I'm not going to do it today, but that's what I would do. I'd spend an hour trying to replicate one loop of that reference track. And then that takes us on to the basic levels, because you need it sounding good as well. So we've already touched upon the fact that our kick drum is peaking at minus 12 dB. And I know this works so well that I can literally take a student's track and with no headphones on, I can look at what's going on and I can tell them if the mix is working or not, and I can fix the mix without even listening to it. That's how ridiculous this is. So kick drum, peaking at minus 12. Then when you've got your bass line in, we want the sub bass to be averaging minus 20 decibels, more or less. In fact, let's just recreate that bass line now. I know this is not the smoothest of YouTube videos, but I wanted to give maximum value. And this isn't going to be for everyone, but I know who this is for. And you know if this is for you. So let's just create that bass line using the X-ray technique, as I've just discussed. I hope it doesn't get flagged for copyright. This works so well, sometimes to get flagged for copyright just for a replication of a track. We know what key it's in because we can look it up. So I think actually it's in F minor. Just check on Beatport. Sometimes this gets it wrong, but most of the time it's right. So it's in F minor, hit scale mode, F minor, like so, boom. I don't think this is F minor at all. I think it's actually E flat minor. So yeah, quite often it gets it wrong. Okay, so it's best to do it by ear. This is the beauty of slowing the whole thing down, because it allows you to really focus, like so. At the moment, this is pretty much a replication of the track. So I'll speed it up a bit, back to the normal tempo, and let's listen to what's going on in the sound. And we've actually got a 12-step process as well in the accelerator for identifying the characteristics of any sound so you can recreate it and use it in your own music. So let's look at some of those now. Cool, so it's kind of a pluck. So let's put a filter on there and let's just make it a bit plucky. Okay, so we're getting close. I'm not going to do this perfectly because of time, but you can see how quickly we can use those techniques to actually get it to work. I'm doing this all to show you about what we need to do with the sub bass levels. So I'm just going to roll off the top end of that bass down to 100 hertz, like so. And now check this out. I can set this so the average volume is averaging about -20. And it already is because I've set it correctly. So it's going to be comparable to the reference track. And let's start off with that little automation because it's a big part of the character of this sound. And again, we'll get to automation in a few minutes as well. I wanted to help as much as I could with this. And let's just put a sidechain compressor on there. You could use Kickstart by Nicky Romero or Shaperbox, which is kind of what we prefer in the accelerator. There's a few reasons for that. You basically get lots of tools in one. But I'm just going to use a sidechain compressor because we're doing this all in Ableton. So that's where I can use this sidechain trigger track, which is just a really short, sharp tick sound that you never hear because I've got it set to sends only. Need more water. And what it's going to do is just duck this sidechain compressor. So I'll take the input from there, sidechain trigger, because, and this is another tip I want to share with you, you only ever want one thing handling the sub bass at any one time. So it has to be either the kick or the bass line handling the sub bass. And that's why we duck it out the way. And actually in Shaperbox, you can just duck the sub frequencies so the top of the bass doesn't have to duck. And now if we look at our reference track compared to our track on the low end, we'll see there should be, if we roll off everything over 100 hertz, this is the reference track. And this is our track. Maybe our bass needs to extend a little bit, but you can see how close our track is to the reference track. Now, when I've spent an hour doing all of the X-ray technique, this is what we end up with. Pa-pa! Nice, and here's the reference track. Pretty close, right? At this point, you're probably wondering, okay, well, we've replicated a track, but what use is that to me? This is where we can use that sound palette and create our own idea. And this is how I would suggest doing it. You can stay in the same key if you want, but you can change the key if you want to have a slightly different vibe. But I'm going to stay in the same key just to keep things simple. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate all of that. Then I'm going to delete the bass. And what I'm going to do is just jam out a new bass rhythm on the root note of the track. And in this instance, as we discovered, is E flat minor, the scale. So let's just play our beats and loop it. So you can tap out the rhythm first if you're not that great at playing the keyboard like I'm not, or you can program it in the piano roll editor. If we've got scale mode, it makes it super easy. So let's go to our bass line like there and just program in that rhythm using the snare skip point. Like so. And I want to keep it fairly simple because that's the vibe of the original. So I think that sounds pretty cool. So let's just repeat that rhythm. And then using scale mode, we can just change some of the notes if we do want a bit of a progression. So let's just duplicate that progression. And now, when we put that onto our sub bass track as well, because that's part of what I did during the X-ray technique, now we've got this. And if you listen to the original track further on, there's the main vocal from the original Poison track. So I could look for something that's going to do a similar job, which is really going to change the vibe. So I'm just going to look for vocal on Splice. I'm going to go for R&B, and I'm going to go for male. And we know the scale that we're working in, so I could go E flat minor. And I can just play that and jam out some vocals whilst we're listening. So to do that, I'm going to create a MIDI channel. I'm just going to load in Splice Bridge. You don't have to do it this way, but as I say, this is kind of the process that I found works really well and helps people produce quickly. And then we can just sync that up and preview some vocals.
I keep boys by my side, CJ Ike, now I gotta roll with ice.
That's pretty cool as well.
Now they wanna move at the bits, boy wanna throw 10 bitch. Nah, where the bass gets you moving. Couple hits to the face. I held a gun but ain't a killer. Can I keep it any realer?
That's pretty cool. Now, it might seem trite, but honestly, this is how our students get these crazy results so quickly and get to do things that they've only dreamed about, like playing at these festivals or releasing on their favorite labels. And I've met and spoken to enough top-tier A-list producers to know that they reference music as well. And as David Bowie said, the only art that he consumes is that he can steal from. And if someone like David Bowie is saying it, it's probably worth listening to. The next stage, step 5 of this system, is the arrangement. So you've got a loop that sounds great, maybe 4 or 8 bars. I know that you know what that's like, but now you need to take it into a full arrangement. This is when you can also use your reference track to help you map out the arrangement. So where do the beats come in? Where's just the top kick playing? Where does the bass line come in? Comes in there, that's when the hi-hats are coming in as well. And you go through the whole track and you just map out yours to match the reference track. And it's worth mentioning, you can use this technique as little or as much as you want. You could just replicate the kick and the snare and have it working really well together and decide that you've got inspiration for a completely different bass line. You might use one track to help you with the sounds and then another track to help you with the arrangement. You can do this as much or as little as you want, but it really helps. At that point, you would go into the automation, blending all of those sections together in what I call the 4-dimensional arrangement process, because you've got the blocks that sound great and then you smooth them together again using the reference track to work out what effects you should be using, what transitions you can be using before finally going into the mixing and the mastering stage. And that is the fastest way that you can produce something that sounds really good and is in an arrangement that's actually proven to work on the dance floor. We've already touched upon a couple of the things that I like to do straight out the gate to get the levels matched. But if you want to find out everything that I've learned over the last 25 years that has really helped me and my students, you can check that video out there, because many of my students are now also mixing and mastering engineers and earning money from it. And the tips in this video is what help them do that. Before you head over there though, don't forget to download the guide using the link below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you over at that next video.